Now let's talk about what is normal in pulse. From what you can see on the screen, you can see that about 100 to 150 is normal for, beats per minute is normal for our kids, for babies, because they have very small size of heart and they need more frequent contraction and expansion so that they can maximize the cardiac output. They are growing, and so there is need for enough oxygen pumping. The cells are at maximum or peak level of work or performance. Energy is needed and all those things. So most times pulse usually increase or the heart increase, decrease as the heart size increases because we have enough things going out. The cardiac output is more. As the heart size increases, the pulse rate reduces. And that's what you can see in the sequence on the screen. You can see what, when we're at infants, what it will be like, and at adults, what will be like. And it's usually, there's something that is usually change for people who are athletic. Athletic training does increase the parasympathetic tones, and this kind of enhance the cardiac stroke volume. So what I mean is that because the heart does a lot, because the person is doing a lot, it needs a lot of oxygen, it's gulping it of oxygen. There's more work that is being done. So the heart is then trained to restrict itself to beat at a lower rate, even though it's passing across. Because if it has to sustain that at that higher rate, there might be some things over. So there's this adaptive measure the heart then is trained to go into, and so most times people who are athletic have this resting state heart rate, which is around 40 to 50, which is normal for them. 40, 50, 60. It's not a pathological condition. If the person is really athletic, the heart might have adapted to keep the pulse or the heart rate at that low level. That's just the chipping. So what do we need to know when assessing pulse clinically? Usually, it is important to pay attention to these four things: how fast the heart rate is, or the pulse rate is, the rhythm, is it a regular rhythm or an irregular rhythm? And this may indicate that there is an atrial fibrillation when we have an irregular rhythm. When irregular rhythm means that it's not within a particular rhythm. Well, I don't know how best to explain this, but I think I have a couple of other things I could explain it later on the slide. And when the rhythm is not regular, that means there might be some sort of occlusion or maybe an atrial fibrillation somewhere that is causing some hindrance that is not allowing it to fall in place, or maybe disrupting the coordinated contraction that the heart will normally follow. Well, so look at the volume. The volume may be weak, it may be normal, and it may be bounding. When a pulse is weak, it may suggest that there is a poor cardiac output. What is coming out of the heart is not coming with the right force, or there might be an occlusion, or like a blockage or a restriction in the movement from the heart. Now, when we have a bounding pulse, that may indicate that there is a high stroke volume, like aortic regurgitation, when you have feedback response or feedback within the um, aorta that is pushing this blood to the rest of the body. Or the person might be going through some level of hyperthyroidism, which usually triggers some biochemical problems, that maybe have high level of influx of calcium that would now be preventing those things. There are some biochemical mechanisms that regulate this. I think I mentioned that in one other thing that I once ran like that. And also the character. So what we should note is that before I go to what we should note, let's give a case study of a woman who is 52, and she has good health. She monitors her blood pressure. She runs. I think her blood pressure was around 120/80, but over time she came down with dementia, and that was around 58 years of age. She had this early onset of dementia, and we're like, okay, what could have happened? One of the things that was not paid, they didn't pay attention to, was the pulse pattern. The pattern of the pulse over the years was irregular. It was showing that there was a pressure on the white matter. I'll get to explain a bit about this later. The problem on the pulse pattern is very critical when it is not well analyzed or paid attention to. And if we're able to look at it critically and maybe just modulate one or two activities or maybe one or two things, we may get to be able to coordinate or rightfully correct this pattern, and then we prevent some of these downstream effects later. Other things could be responsible for the dementia, but pulse pattern was identified for this woman because they tried to look at the history, reversing it, taking it back to, because she always have a checkup. Now, according to Framingham's heart study some times ago, it says that 67% of people with normal blood pressure, who says we have normal blood pressure, may have some dangerous pulse pattern, even if you're checking the blood pressure. And if we're not paying attention to the pulse pattern, thank God for the smart wristwatches now. They take the pulse pattern, they take the pulse rate, they also take the blood pressure. So at least we have something that is all encompassing now. And so when there is an irregular or problem with the pulse pattern, it may actively damage the brain. And it's good that we are getting to know about this now. But the good news is this can be stopped, this can be regulated. And how do we go about this? What the pulse tells us about the brain is that whenever there is a vascular stiffness, maybe there's a restriction, it is equal to brain damage. Why? Because there are three major things that happens. The stiffness can reduce the cushion effect that the artery has. And so that force with which the blood is leaving the heart is what it will transfer. You know what we call transferred aggression. That is what we get to the brain, and that's not good for it. I was able to break it down into three um, major key points through which this destroys the brain. I also say that the excessive pressure that reaches the brain is delicate for the capillaries, and over time, this could lead to chronic damage to the white matter. Now, this major three things, like the hammer, what I mean is that when that aggression that is coming from the heart reaches the brain, it looks like somebody is using something to hit the same spot over time. Now, over time, that thing will weaken up. I'm trying to allow you picture that. So this way, the hammer may create some sort of chaos. The hammer effect creates some sort of prayer because the prayer is too high. That is reaching there, and then the heart loses its natural variability. Then it starts beating like robots. And in that case, that's when we have the chaos part. When we have low heart rate variability, there's something we call heart rate variability, which is a very important factor when it comes to the functionality of the heart and its connection with the brain. When this is not rhythmic, I was saying something about the rhythm that time. When the chaos, when there is chaos and this is not following the right pattern, then it will also affect the brain because the heart starts beating like robot. The third is the drought part where we have weak peripheral pulses. And in this case, the blood does not get to other extremities. And then the weakness starts from there, meaning that the brain is being stopped, is not getting some of those feedback again. And I think we should just go right in, and that way we'll be able to look at it more carefully. The hammer that I mentioned is talking about the weapon that this prayer creates. And the difference between our blood pressure, between the top and the bottom, is what gives our pulse pressure. So when you want to know the pressure of your pulse, the difference between the upper and when you take your blood pressure, the upper and the lower one. Now, normal pulse pressure is usually around 40. But when it goes beyond that, going around 60, beyond 60, I think 60 is still normal. So when it goes beyond 60, that means the artery is becoming stiffened, or maybe there's something there I might not be able to say exactly. Maybe it would be good to consult a health practitioner. And this may show that they can no more absorb those pressure that comes as a result of the pumping from the blood whenever the left ventricle constricts and then it releases the blood. And then the wave can no more, the arteries can no more get to cushion that effect. I don't know if you've had to, traditionally, I know that we use, when you have small mortar and pestle and you are pounding something, sometimes we put clothes under it to cushion it, and you're pounding, you see that the sound is lower. But like, imagine you putting that same small mortar and pestle on maybe a towel or something without that cushioned cloth or something that we do use to pad it up, and then you are hitting it, the sound will be so much, and even the effect. And the funny thing is that it doesn't do as much as it's meant to do with the very loud sound. I'm trying to compare that to the prayer that is going in there. So some of this excessive prayer with slams the brain, and it begins to hit the delicate capillaries. The brain's capillaries is very delicate. Then it then causes some sort of small microbleeding. This microbleeding then leads to the formation of some myocardial infarcts. Myocardial infarct, don't worry about those big grammar. Those myocardial infarcts are those small things that then now form plaque and are now available to be plaguing around some parts of the brain, and then leading to increasing the risk of dementia. Most times when this thing persists, it increases the risk of dementia to about 3.2 times. So that is what research has shown. And let us look at how some of this progression can happen. First, it can happen over the years. In the first year, there might be micro damage. In the second year, maybe first to third year, you may not even feel anything. The person might not feel anything. There might just be small lesion on the brain. Maybe some small, if there is any need to do some scans in the brain, there will be those lesions, small will be appearing there. But you might not even notice, but there might be some occasional memory loss. How come? I used to remember some of these things. Well, what's happening? It might be good to pay attention to some of those things when you are seeing some of those physiological manifestations. And by year 3 to 7, you might start seeing some lesion multiplying all over the brain, and then the cognitive decline may then be getting more noticeable. At 7+ years, we're already on that level of dementia matter. And then it might be important that during all those years, the blood pressure may really be good. There might really be no much. I have a very good blood pressure, but the pulse pattern is creating problem to the brain. And aside dementia, there are other things that could result from this. This is just the most conspicuous one. Dementia goes hand in hand with some other brothers and sisters when it comes to the neurological or neurodegenerative diseases. And this happens silently, even when we are monitoring our BP. And some of us don't even monitor our blood pressure at all. So sometimes it's just good to it does no harm just to know. And if there is anything to do to prevent, it's good to also do the prevention. That's why we're sensitizing us. Now I want to quickly touch on what happens graphically. You see that stiffening leads to generation of those waves. You see where it's hitting the brain right there. Those hitting is what leads to those plaques. Can you see those plaques there? Then when it starts plaguing the brain, there is cognitive decline. You see the difference between a brain that is normal and when the plague increases. You can see that there is a shadowing, and so there is no transmission. This transduction of those signals within the brain is no more completed. It's no more complete, and then problem may come in. So I want to quickly touch on HRV. HRV is heart rate variability, and I mentioned the other time that it's very important because it maintains it's more like a proxy for the brain's autonomic control. The balancing of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is communicated through the heart rate variability. When we have the flight and the fight mode, when there is no balance between these two, then there might be a problem. The heart rate variability measures how well the brain is managing the body's response to stress. For example, if some of us are familiar with the buffer system, there is usually this lag that when an acid is released into it, it's able to withstand it. When the base is released into it, it's also able to withstand it. That's the buffering system. When the heart rate variability is high, it shows that, okay, this brain is resilient, ready, Agidigba, to receive and to maybe have this cushion effect to the right or to the left. When it is flight, is ready. When it is also in a relaxing state, it is also ready for that relaxed mode. But when the system, when the heart rate variability is low, it shows that there is a problem or there's a chronic stress response and there may be fatigue. For example, if there is no buffering system, if it is on the low side, meaning that any little trigger, the person may be thrown off balance. And that means there is an imbalance in the nervous system. So if you have a smartwatch that gives you information about your HRV, sometimes some of the smartwatches does this. If you have a Holter monitor, I think also does the mirroring or ECG, that you get that in the clinic just to check your HRV. If it does say something that is low, it might be good to get a healthcare professional to advise you or maybe tell you what to do next. And the fluctuation that we have between successive heartbeats is good. And sometimes that is what they relate to heart rate variability. It cannot just be happening as metronome, like whoop, 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 with the same sound. Sometimes there is usually some shaking, so that when there is now the real shaking, it won't be thrown off balance. Well, I think that's the best way I can explain this. If you want more details about this, just check more about heart rate variability and how you can get to manage it well for a healthy brain. Let me quickly go to what matters to us, which is what the heart rate variability rate should be like. When it loses its intelligence, it means that the heart is not able to anymore be sensitive to some of those changes, and so it could collapse at any time, leading to some sort of anxiety, depression, or even brain fog. So most times the low heart rate variability is associated with 45% of depression, and it's important we pay attention to it. So when we have a perfectly clear heartbeat that doesn't have that sometimes some wavy thing, it may show that there might be a warning sign for us to pay attention to. But there are things that can be done when you breathe in and your heart is supposed to speed up with some tiny bits. When you breathe out, it should slow down. So that variation in those it's supposed to also reflect in the reading. When that is not showing, then that means that there might be a problem, and this has a lot to do with the connection to the brain. So let us remember that when we have when the heart is losing its intelligence, it may be tantamount to when the variability from the heart rate is not normal, when it is below the expected. Now, when blood flows quietly, sometimes it fails, and we are not really paying attention to it. And this is what I termed as the drought. I said the three. The first one is the hammer. The third is the chaos, when we have a low heart rate variability. And the third is the drought, when the peripheral pulses are not really somewhat weak. Now, if you feel, the simple test is to try to feel the pulse on our wrist. That would be strong, right? A lot of us feel it. Now, can we take it to the ankle to check at the top or at the top of our feet? That's dorsalis pedis pulse. If it is weak or we can barely notice it, we might need to pay some attention. I have tried to do some of this, and sometimes it raises it, make it like, "Ooh, am I healthy?" But it's just for us to pay attention to some of these things. Sometimes just to be able to mitigate some downstream effect that may come. That would, if there's anything to do. So yeah, I need to take a walk. I think I need to be conscious of this thing, and it helps us to get our brain to its peak performance. And this is a plague for stroke. These people may stand risk of stroke, 2 times risk of stroke. So